Hello viewers, you are welcome to the big story. Middle East, a new frontier, as Israel opens a new theater of war from Hamas in Gaza to Hezbollah in Lebanon, then to Yemenis jihadist groups, and from this, Islamic Revolution Guards in Iran, and now to Damascus, Syria. A new frontier of Israel Defense Force opens a new theater of hostilities with the new Syrian regime. Tel Aviv, in the course of trying to wave off any existential threats, decided to change the Middle East dynamics by trying to secure a buffer zone for the security of the State of Israel. Now, open a new front war with the Syrian regime after the exit of former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, now exiled in Russia, calls for international concern. Where it all started, why is Israel bombing Syria, and who are the Druze community? Israel turns on the new Syrian regime by striking the Ministry of Defense building in Damascus. On a Wednesday, Israel fighter jets also bombed Syrian government forces in the south, where sectarian violence has erupted between the Druze minority and Bedouin tribes. So far, more than 300 people have been killed in the clashes since Sunday in the week, according to Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. How it all started. Over past dozens of years, Syrian militants leader Abu Mohammed al-Golani, as a leader and head of insurgent groups, he has been in command, renouncing long-time ties to Al-Qaeda and consolidating power before emerging from the shadows. Then, for the 2 years, al-Golani seeks to seize power, leading his fighters in a stunning offensive that sees them in control of Syria's largest city, reigniting the country's long civil war and raising new questions about the then Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, holding on to power. Al-Golani's position are evidence of a remarkable transformation, as his success in battlefield follows years of maneuvering among other extremist groups while eliminating competitors and former allies. Later, distancing himself from Al-Qaeda, polishing his image and his extremist group, de facto Salvation Government, in an attempt to win over international governments and the country's religious and ethnic minorities, as many Syrian opposition forces made no gains against al-Assad. As the Syrian government, with backings from Iran and Russia, has maintained its control of about 70% of the country's swath of land. Let me go on a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue. Welcome back. Let's continue from where we stopped. Al-Golani ties to Al-Qaeda as far back as 2023 and 2003, when he joined extremists battling US troops in Iraq. A native of Syria, he was detained several times by the US military, but remained in Iraq. The time Al-Qaeda joined forces with other groups of extremists, Islamic State of Iraq, led by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. In 2011, a popular uprising against the Syrian regime of al-Assad forced a government crackdown that led to all-out war. Al-Golani prominence grew when al-Baghdadi sent him to Syria to establish a branch of Al-Qaeda, the Nusra Front. US labeled the new group as a terrorist organization and still remains, with a bounty of $10 million on him as Syria war intensified in 2013, same as Golani's ambition, defying al-Baghdadi calls to dissolve the Nusra Front and merge it with Al-Qaeda operations in Iraq, to form Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, now known as ISIS, though pay allegiance to Al-Qaeda, which later dissociates itself from ISIS. The Nusra Front later battled ISIS and later eliminated most of its competitors among Syria armed opposition groups that opposed to Assad. Al-Golani made it clear that his goals of making Syria ruled under Islamic law and no room for the country's Alawiti and Shiite Druze community with Christian minorities. In 2016, Al-Golani revealed his facial identity for the first time to the public, announcing his group was renaming itself Jabhat al-Sham and cutting its ties to Al-Qaeda. This new organization has no affiliation to any external entity, he said in the video, while wearing military garbs and turban. This move paved way for Al-Golani to assert full control to the fracturing militant groups. A year later, his alliance rebranded again as the group merged, consolidating Al-Golani's power in the northwest of Syria, Idlib province. After a devastating military campaign to Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Israeli regime succeeded in blocking arms supply route to Syria from Lebanon by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) regime in Iran, paving the way for the strongest militant groups to topple Assad regime in Damascus. By Al-Golani militant groups, al-Assad now fled and exiled in Russia. Since 2017 and 2018, Hayat Tahrir Sham (HTH) has been a prevailing force in Idlib province after government forces retook control of Aleppo in December 2016, emerged as the last major bastion for various rebel groups. Let's go on a quick break. When we come back, we continue. Welcome back. Let's continue. Who are the Druze community? That is the big question. However, the Druze community are a small religious minority group spread across Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, occupying the Golan Heights. They are an Arab-speaking, ethno-religious community whose faith emerged as an offshoot of Shia Islam in the 11th century. Numbering about 1 million worldwide, about half lives in Syria, constituting 3% of the population. In Israel, approximately 152,000 Druze community. Citizens are residents, which involves their daily lives in Israel. They have historically tried to maintain autonomy during the country's 14-year-old civil war. Druze community in the southern province of Sweda operated their own militia and distanced themselves from both the Assad regime and the Islamic factions. Since the ouster of President Bashar al-Assad In December, Syrian new government under Ahmed al-Shara has sought to reimpose state control across fractured region, as many have resisted those efforts. Tension began in May to July 2025, when fighting between government forces and the Druze fighters led to the death of hundreds. According to Syria Observatory for Human Rights and the UK monitoring group, al-Shara rise was supported in parts by rebels who have since opened back channels contacts with Israel, reportedly facilitated by the US, according to the New York Times. However, the trust deficit still persists between Syria's fragile government and other religious minority groups, with the Druze feeling insecure despite the new administration of al-Shara's assurances. However, Israel military jets struck Syria regime facilities, having claimed to have protected the Druze minority by attacking the Syrian regime, with innocent lives being lost and the new regime defense building in Damascus being destroyed. The Sweda clashes marked the third major flare-up of minority-related violence since the fall of al-Assad regime. Israel Defense Force stated that Syrian regime forces had introduced troops and weapons into the Druze community area and also in the mountain area, a direct violation of demilitarization agreement that restrict military presence in southern Syria, as responded by Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and IDF. Israel Defense Chief Israel Katz. Meanwhile, diplomacy has since been involved since Wednesday of that week, as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has helped broker a truce. But before now, what infuriated Israel bombardment on Damascus on the Tuesday was the deployment of Syrian army and interior minister forces to Sweda, following violent clashes between the Druze Bedouin fighters that began on Sunday, leaving dozens dead or wounded. Israel regularly justifies its air raid on Syria by claiming to target Iranian-linked groups or to protect the Druze community, particularly those with ties to Israel Druze. Majority of Syrian Druze mainly living in Sweda, rural Damascus, Quneitra, and parts of Idlib province. Syria's total population is just about 22 million. Damascus believed that it had a green light from both the US and Israel to dispatch its forces to the south, despite months of Israel warning never to do so. According to sources, which include Syrian political and military officials, the understanding was based on public and private comments from the U.S. Special Envoy to Syria, Thomas Barak, citing that Syria should be centrally administered as one country without autonomous zones. U.S. State Department maintains that Syria state has an obligation to protect all Syrians, including minority groups, urging the Syrian government to hold perpetrators of such heinous violence crimes accountable. Several hundred people have reportedly been killed that week in the south of Syria, in violence involving local fighters, government authority, and the Bedouin tribes. As violence so escalates in Sweda, Israel launched airstrikes, including attack on Sweda on Wednesday on the Defense Ministry, and the target near the presidential palace were equally bombed by Israel Air Force. Let's go on a break. When we come back, we continue. Welcome back. Israel said on Friday it was allowing the Syrian security forces to enter Sueda governorate for 48 hours, citing ongoing unrest in southern Syria, in light of the ongoing instability in southwest of Syria. Israel has agreed to allow limited entry of the Syrian internal security forces into Sueda district for next 48 hours. Deadly violence has plagued Sueda province since Sunday as Druze province and Druze fighters clashed with Sunni Bedouin tribes who were later joined by government forces. Israel-owned Druze community demanded that Jerusalem act to protect their brethren across the border, as reports emerged from Sueda of regime forces killing women and boys, looting homes, shaving Druze cleric mustaches, which Druze fighters also beating captured government forces. Syria troops withdrew from Sueda after a diplomatic truce announced on Wednesday after Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu mentioned that a ceasefire was achieved, not by diplomacy, but the use of military force, that he had acted forcefully for Syrian forces to withdraw and agree to a ceasefire, with an instruction to IDF to demilitarize the region south of Damascus, stretching from Golan Heights to the Druze Mountain. Secondly, protect the Druze community, referring them as brothers of their own brother. By acting successfully through strength, Tel Aviv would achieve all its military objectives. U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barracks, said Israel and Syria had agreed to a ceasefire supported by Turkey, Jordan and other nations, while Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Syrian President Ahmed Sarah, supported by the US, Jordan and its neighbors, in this subtle diplomacy, has asked upon the Druze Bedouins and Sunnis to put down their weapons and together work for the economic interest of the new Syria. With this, we end this episode of Diplomatic Fire. Please do follow us on all our social media platforms by sending your comments, like and share this page, and then do hit the subscription button for subsequent and insightful edition of Diplomatic Fire. Thanks for watching. My name remains Chris Ejiofor.